Okay, I think we're ready now. Can I call your attention back up here? Well, thank you very much for the invitation to participate. My name is Rusty Hawkins, and I am a historian up at Indiana Wesleyan University. And I am so pleased that you all are participating in this event today. I think it's good, and I think it's right, and I think it's timely. And I'm going to try in my very brief time with you today to maybe try to help us think even more broadly about what racial reconciliation is and requires of us. And I want to do this by trying to push a little bit on the idea of what racism itself even is, because I think we have a tendency, and when I say we, I mean especially white people, to think about racism in very individualistic terms. Sociologists who have studied this say that white people think of racism differently than people of color. And one of the reasons for this is that white people don't see the structures of racism that operate at a different level than just individual feelings. So while it's good to interrogate our feelings and our own kind of prejudices internally, I would also kind of like to push us a little bit more to think about different structures that exist in ways in which we have inherited structures and are complicit in the retaining of those structures today. And I think the best way to do this is to take you into the past. And I'm sorry to do this to you because you all look like a very nice and kind group, but I need to drop some history on you. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back in time now to the Civil Rights Movement, because I think this is a moment in American history that we can really see the shift of the way that white people talk about race. And when I say white people, I mean white Christians in particular. That's going to be the focus of what I'm talking about. I am an American historian who studies the Civil Rights Movement, and I became fascinated in the Civil Rights Movement because when I would watch these videos of protest marches that we all watch in our history classes in high school and middle school and in college, I became kind of obsessed with these people on the sidelines, these people who are shouting and are yelling and wondering what in the world is going on in their minds that are causing them to be so resistant to the civil rights protests of the 1950s and 1960s. And I became even more intrigued by this when I discovered that during this period in the American South, in the 1950s, 9 out of 10 white Southerners identified themselves as Christian. And I thought to myself, how do you have this reality where on one hand you profess to be a Christian and 90% of your society says that they're Christians, and the attendance rate in churches in the South are the highest of any region in the country. And yet on the other hand, this is the region in the country that we are seeing directly the impacts of being unable to conceive of extending civil rights to people who aren't white. And so that was kind of the impetus behind my research agenda. So let's find this out. And so what I did, I spent years, and I focused on one state in South Carolina. I spent years. I'm still spending years. I'm in about the 10th year of this project that is finally coming to completion this year. 10 years traveling the state of South Carolina, going to every archive I can find and reading letters and reading sermons and reading pamphlets from this period of history, trying to figure out what was going on with white Christians. And what I came to discover is that a very important part of the resistance to the civil rights movement was a theology that said we have to resist these changes in our society because God himself is a segregationist. God was the one who set up this system of segregation in our society. And so if we allow this system of segregation to go away, we are thwarting God's will. We are acting against the will of God. There are a couple of former students that I've had in class who I've subjected to the evidence I have of this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of documents that they've read and have helped me kind of comb through this research. But essentially what we can establish here is a approach to Scripture for these white Christians that began in Genesis and ended in Revelation and saw segregation pretty much running throughout the Bible. And I wanted to kind of just walk you through the way they understood this theological segregation so you can appreciate the levels at which it was operating. First of all, these white Christians, and I found this stuff, these are actually dozens and dozens of published pamphlets that circulated throughout the South. So you find these pamphlets over and over again in people's papers. So these pamphlets, sermons, and letters that people are exchanging with each other all have these similar themes running throughout them. The first theme is nature, that God created the natural order, and so we can divine his will from the natural order, and we see that in the natural world you have things like red ants and black ants, you have bluebirds and red birds. The natural order, the lower animal kingdom, has all segregated. God segregated them, they don't mix, and so we too shouldn't mix as races. So this kind of like the general revelation of creation was part of this theology of segregation. And then beginning in Genesis and working through, segregationists saw in the Bible, we have stories like the Tower of Babel, where God is clearly dividing up people groups. We have stories like Delilah and Samson, where God shows the difficulties of when you have people of different races as they understood the Jews and the Philistines coming together, it causes problems. We have Solomon and all of his foreign wives. We see the problems arising from that. We see Abraham, the patriarch, desiring to find for his own son someone from his own people for his wife. And so this fear about this interracial marriage that naturally would come if we allow civil rights to take place in this country was this driving fear that they saw prohibited in the pages of Scripture. But it wasn't just this ideas about marriages and the fear that went along with that. It was also this idea that God himself, time and time again, marked people and set them apart. And so we see stories of Cain being given a special mark, and then he's different as a result of that. And we have the curse of Ham in the Noah account. And these people were set apart and were different as a result of this. We have Jesus who talks about how in the final days all nations will be called before him, and he will divide them, sheep and goats. And this was another segregationist kind of approach to Scripture, saying that God supported this. And then finally, the kind of the chief text that segregationists returned to time and time again was Acts 17:26. Acts 17:26 says that God created from the blood of one man all the nations of the earth, and he set for these nations of the earth the bounds of their habitation.